Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Caregiving Gen X Style. I'm Steve Mullen.
And I'm Jennifer Mullen.
One of the harder decisions to make in caregiving is selecting a senior living facility for your elderly loved one. One of the reasons for that is the act of touring those communities is highly controlled by the people who work there. In this episode, we'll talk with someone who has conducted a bunch of those tours while working in facilities, and she'll give us tips on how to see through the smoke and mirrors. But first, Jennifer, how's your mom?
Goggy's doing well.
Of course.
Post-hospital stay, we are now, 5 weeks since
Sounds
she's
about
been
right.
out of the hospital. Yeah, so she's, had a pretty good regimen of in-home PT and OT, which has been really nice. She's definitely been getting stronger, which, when you're in it right after the hospital stay, I definitely had my moments of thinking,
it's not going to get better. It's not going to get better. It's not going to get better.
It's not going to get better. Is she ever going to be to the level she was before she went into the hospital? And actually, she's doing really well. Maybe not quite right to the level before hospital, but pretty close.
She is what they used to call a tough old bird.
And she really is. She
Yep.
is. She's a trooper, and she keeps her spirits up, probably better than my brother and I do sometimes.
Yep,
Because,
absolutely.
it's long and exhausting for us. But I was thinking about it this morning when I was over there, definitely trying to see the benefits. So that one thing that my brother and I do is, we do exercises with mom on days that she doesn't have PT or OT. So she has her, little 1 pound weights, which is, really all she can do for like these series of exercises that we do. But my brother also brought over, I think she had 2 pound weights from before. And then he brought over like the wrist weights, like the Velcro.
With the sand in them.
Wrist weights. Yeah. So I put on the wrist weights and I use the 2 pound weights and I sit there and I do the exercises with her. So
good for you.
I'm also exercising while she is exercising.
Good for you.
So we sort of have our little routine with that, and that seems to be going well. And in fact, today she did great. She did great. So things are looking bright.
Good news.
Which is lovely, just as we head into the holidays.
Good news.
That is good. So, Steve, how's your mom?
She's doing good. I think I had mentioned on a previous episode that she has a couple of new, shall we call, neighbors in her ALF. People she already knew from previous parts of her life, from her old assisted living, from when she was living in a house by herself.
Which is pretty great.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah. I've kind of noticed she's becoming, it's coming from a good place, but she's becoming a little bit of a busybody when it comes to them. Okay. And what I mean by that is, with one of them, this woman's memory is clearly failing. She saw her at the dinner table pull out a prescription bottle and pull a pill out. Mm-hmm. And she said, your name, I won't mention the name. What are you doing? She said, I'm taking my pill. I forgot to take it earlier. And my mother's immediate thought was, did you really forget to take it earlier, or are you taking it again? Mm-hmm. So she went to someone at the facility and said, I know, this is the part. Should she really be managing her own medication? And she does know this woman's family from having been a neighbor of hers. Yeah. And they are having a meeting about it because I mean, based on what my mother has told me about, her asking multiple times, what's the name of this place? How long have you lived here? Over and over and over again. Her memory is clearly failing. So that is a person that probably should not be in charge of their own medication.
Probably not.
The other woman, she's asked, this is a woman that used to live in the assisted living where they, the previous assisted living where my mother was, and she got to know her daughter, and she's been kind of checking up on her, and she's sticking her nose in. I mean, it comes from a good place.
It does.
It really does, but I do kind of feel like she might be approaching the level of sticking her nose where it doesn't belong.
As long as she doesn't cross the line. It is like the assisted living version, though, of just older people in their neighborhood, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, when your mom was in the neighborhood, she was very involved. She was on the
She knew
the neighborhood board,
business.
and she knew what everybody was doing.
My God, that just brought back memories of going to see her at her house, and I would hear everything about everybody.
Yes, so-and-so didn't put their trash out on the right day, or whatever.
Yeah, and so she fell and broke her leg, or her daughter's not doing so well, blah, 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 blah. So I guess it's
the same thing with my mom at her apartment. I sometimes know much more about her neighbors than I really care to. So, well, I think it's sweet. Your mom's looking out for them. like you said, as long as she's not crossing the line.
Yeah, I don't think she's quite gotten there yet, but
fine.
she's walking up to it. That's for, rolling up to it. She's in a wheelchair.
Ha ha.
Right. So let's get to our episode. We've offered our tips before on how to select a senior living facility. That was one of our earliest episodes. But one of the hardest things of that process is the tour.
Yeah. And right, full transparency. It's not even like we really knew what we were doing all those years ago.
Absolutely
we were just
not.
thrown into it and had to figure it out.
Well, we had to go through this twice, though. So the second time, we knew
a little more.
We knew a little bit more of what we didn't know.
We knew the questions to ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
But,
some of them.
the reason for that it's so hard is that in many cases, nursing homes, memory care, assisted living communities, they only show you what they want you to see and only tell you what you want to hear. You have to know the techniques to see through their techniques.
Yeah, I'll just really quick squirrel, but related squirrel moment. I think about the first place where your mom was, and of course they had that beautiful movie theater area up on the second floor with like the leather recliners and the big screen.
It was beautiful.
How often was there ever
Nobody
a movie
ever
in there?
used that thing.
Right? There was like never really a movie showing, and really it was like if someone who worked there like walked up and happened to pop a tape in the VCR. And by the way,
it was actually DVDs, but you're close.
I thought it was a VCR. But anyway, yeah. So, all right. Well, our guest for this episode is going to help. She's Sherry Ross, an experienced senior living sales professional, which means that she is the one who conducts the tours. So she's also written a book called Senior Living Made Simple. Man, I wish we'd had that back.
Absolutely.
Back a few years ago. Sherry, welcome to Caregiving Gen X Style.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, first off, this is what we always ask our guests, and that is, Sherry, how are your parents?
Well, I have a few parents. I have two sets because I've got two step parents and an in-law. I've got basically 5 to look out for.
Wow.
Yeah. Out of the 5, I would say that 2 are in excellent shape and I need no worrying from me right now. And then the other 3 are certainly declining. So one of them actually just went to an assisted living just about 2 years ago, but he is thriving there. He was really, really declining at home. So he's doing really good and really just shows when I advocate for senior living, he's like a shining example. He's doing great. The other 2 definitely, I'm noticing some slowdown, and I've got my eye on them. I haven't had to do anything just yet, but conversations are looming.
Yep, I know about those conversations. So tell us about yourself and your book. Your book is Senior Living Made Simple.
Sure. So I was in the senior living industry for it's been about 15 years and worked within several communities for about 10 years. And, I realized whenever I would meet with families, they walk in to take a tour and they were typically completely overwhelmed and often had a lot of guilt, fear, anxiety, and asked a lot of the very similar questions. So I wrote this book, Senior Living Made Simple. It gives kind of a roadmap for all of this whole maze of senior living. And it's a very realistic book. But it's compassionate. It's a little funny. It's got a lot of stories from my years, in the community. Because honestly, and I've heard you say this before, if you don't laugh during this process, cry. So,
oh my gosh, yes.
You got to do. There's always going to be a little bit of both. So the book kind of walks families through everything from, is it time yet, or how do we actually talk to our parent about this, and how do we survive the sibling group chat? So it's part practical guide and part, I think of it as a sanity saver in a lot of ways.
Oh, I love that. Sanity saver. Yes. That's awesome. Well, really what we want to talk about specifically in this episode is how to see through sort of as Steve mentioned, the smoke and mirrors that, can be put up by these communities. And right, like anything, when someone is trying to sell something, they are only going to show and tell you about all of the best things. And we definitely have some experience with this. You know, as we said, Steve's mom's been in 2 assisted living facilities, and we've done a bunch of tours. Sherry, what are some of the things that senior living communities do to, you know, put themselves in the best light?
Oh, where do I begin? I think senior living tours are sort of, I compare them to first dates. You know, like you said, everyone's on their best behavior. So, you know, you're going to see the fresh flowers and smiling staff and cookies and, you know, that magically appear 5 minutes before you get there. And, you know, I think it's absolutely great to enjoy the flowers and the cookies. But you have to remember that a tour is just a snapshot. And, you know, what really matters in the end isn't going to be the decor and the little show that they do. It's the day-to-day vibe. So, you know, when you go into a community, you definitely want to watch how the staff interact with residents when they don't think anybody's looking. You know, are they making eye contact? Are they speaking kindly? Are they, you know, laughing with the residents? Or do you find that, you know, are they rushing past with like, I'm on break or I'm leaving for my break kind of, you know, energy? And then you look at the residents too. You know, are they engaged? Are they chatting with each other? Are they participating in activities? Are they, you know, or kind of, are you noticing them just like sort of lined up or sitting there in chairs, you know, just parked in front of like a TV? You can just tell a lot from the energy in the room. So you definitely want to also listen, because when you walk into a community, you want a community that sort of hums, you know, where there's conversation, there's laughter, there's music. My point is, you know, enjoy the polish and the niceties and all the beautiful things, but read the room. You know, the real of great care are in the little things that you may miss. So, you know, just the warmth in a greeting, the patience in a tone, the respect in the everyday moments. So really pay attention to those things and just know that, yeah, they are sort of putting on a little show or a little first date. So kind of get past that and look a little deeper.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because I'm thinking back to the very first time we went into the first facility that my mother-in-law was in, and 2 things. You mentioned the cookies, and I do remember like they had this little cafe area, you know, and of course part of the tour was, oh, you know, we've got cookies and fruit and tea and coffee out all the time, which I think more or less they did
sometimes. But
also, like, you know, the hindsight is, what the heck difference did that even make? Like, whatever. Okay, so you could have a cookie when you wanted a cookie. That's not really what you should be looking for. But the second thing is, when I think back to like the dining room area at that facility, remember, I felt like everybody was just always sitting at their square tables, 4 people to a table, and no one was talking to anyone.
Right. No, it's absolutely true.
But right, like in hindsight, now we would know, and Sherry, of course, that's what you're saying, is pay attention to those things. I think at the time, first of all, we were a little bit shell-shocked and doing this in very short order, which we weren't anticipating
and that's
doing.
How it typically works.
It typically is like that. But I think I remember thinking at the time, like, ugh, like, you know, this is kind of depressing, but I guess this is just what assisted living is. And of course, now we have the context of the place where your mom is now. It is humming, as you just said, Sherry. Like, it is humming with activity and conversation and, yes, a little busybodiness every now and then, but that's okay.
Yeah, you want it to feel like a community. You don't want it to feel just like an empty like warehouse.
Right. And you mentioned also, you know, the shiny building, all the stuff that they have. And, you know, Jennifer mentioned the movie theater. And we were kind of drawn in by this building, the previous place where my mother was, which, I mean, Sherry, you don't know the history, but it ended up in the end was absolutely 100% terrible. But they, you know, it was a newer building.
It was beautiful.
The apartments were good size, really good size. And everything looked great, but if you scratch under the surface, you realize that's not that important.
Right.
And the place she's in now, I mean, they're actually doing a big renovation on this building, and it's starting to look really, really nice. But when we moved in, you know, it was a little shabby. It was a little bit of an older building, but that's not the important part.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not the size of the apartment. It's not, you know, the paint color. It's really the engagement and the care and who is working there and how it's structured.
So aside from what we've talked about, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen by people who are hunting for a senior living community?
Yeah, well, I think number one, honestly, is what we were just talking about, which is falling for the decor. You know, but you are not buying a house. You're choosing care. So I've seen countless families sort of light up over, you know, these amazing granite countertops that we had, and this like a bistro or a snack area that has cappuccinos and fancy drinks. But then, you know, when they also forgot to ask how many caregivers are actually on the floor and how many, you know, how many staff members do you actually have to care for my loved one? You know, the lobby is not going to guarantee that quality of care. So, you know, I have seen other modest communities that ran like a dream. And then I've seen stunning communities that were totally chaotic, you know, behind the scenes. So admire the loveliness, but then make sure that someone is also getting your mom her medications on time.
Which, well, yeah, let's go back to my mother's old assisted living. And that was one of the huge problems is that they didn't get the existing medications on time. And God help you if you got a new medication, it might be 2 days before they start giving it to you.
Yeah. So that's very important. You want to have good experienced med techs and or nurses on site. So, you know, that's the kind of stuff you want to pay attention to versus, you know, the chandelier.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I love the way you just put it, though. And it really is, it's very simplistic when you think about it, and it makes such sense. But I'm not sure that is how people's brains work. And that is make sure that you're asking about the care they're going to receive, not getting sucked in by, you know, the physical environment. And it just seems so simple, except if you don't know, and if you're the, you know, first time going into a situation like that, it's just the human brain, I think, is wired to think like, oh, beautiful building must mean everything else is run beautifully.
Correct. But that's not always the case.
Yeah.
And then I would say the second big mistake is not asking about the real costs, right? So a lot of communities say they're all inclusive, you know, but then, and it sounds great. And then you realize maybe it's mostly inclusive if you don't need care. So you have to ask for a list of every potential fee, from medication management and all the levels of medication management, and then personal care and laundry, transportation, things like escorting to meals or to activities. You know, I have seen so many families just totally shocked, you know, having a loved one at a community for, you know, say a few months, and then all of a sudden their monthly rate jumps up by hundreds of dollars every month once they've had all these add-ons, you know, that kicked in. So you want to get transparent information up front so that later you're not completely completely caught off guard. And if a community dodges those questions, then that is your sign to keep looking for a different community.
Yeah, even like the level of care, again, I know we keep going back to the first place where my mother-in-law
because
lived,
it was terrible.
Because it was terrible, yeah. But, you know, she went in at a certain level of care and, you know, came out of, I think it was after she came out of a hospital stay, but she literally was exactly the same as she had been really before she had gone in for that hospital, you know, and then I think it was followed by a skilled nursing stay. And then she's back at assisted living exactly at the same level she was before. They insisted that she needed more care. She did not, but they were trying to bump up the price. And we sat at the kitchen table, we pulled out the contract. We were trying to look at all of that.
Well, actually, how it went was truly she came in. So they had 5 levels, the level of care, which, you know, obviously each one of those comes with a different price tag. But she came in at level 5. That was fine. She just was coming out of a pretty serious back surgery. She worked really hard with an occupational therapist, with physical therapists, and they actually voluntarily moved her down to level 4. This was fantastic. It was an acknowledgement that she'd been working hard, and by the way, she saved some money. And then 5 months later, they said her needs were too high for them.
Yeah.
After they moved her down.
Yeah.
It just, and this is what these places do.
Well, and even the contract I remember was when we pulled it out and we were trying to go through it with a fine tooth comb. And I think one of the things we learned, at least with that specific place in that contract, it was rather vague about what the levels of care.
Oh, no, they didn't want you to know because there was no, and that's one great thing about where she is now. And this is something to look at, I guess. This is, a bit of a tip is if they explain to you what their different levels mean.
Yeah.
So where she is now, basically, they just say, how many activities of daily living do they need help with? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's what just determines what level they're in.
Yeah.
At the old place, it was just nebulous.
Yeah.
Nobody explained it. Nobody understood it. And they just basically picked something out of a hat, I think.
Yeah. Do you have any tips on that, Sherry?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would avoid a place like that.
Yeah.
That would not be my first choice and I do know companies that do that, and it's just so vague. And that's the kind of place that personally I would avoid. I like a place that is, like I said, totally transparent, explains it all totally upfront, and gives you specifics, not just vague, levels, because you don't know what exactly they're doing then each month that they're charging you, for these things, but who knows like what they're actually doing. And so you want to find a place, really that gives you upfront costs for specific things that they're doing, and that it doesn't just change from month to month. It should be a set thing unless your loved one or your parent or whatever, starts declining, and you do know that, and you notice that there's more care that they need. And then obviously, care costs can go up potentially then, but you want definitive numbers of what it will be and what it could be.
Well, Sherry, one of the first things you mentioned in your book is that we should trust our noses. What does that mean?
Yes. And actually, can I go back really quick? Because I just wanted to give one more mistake that a lot of people do is they don't tour more than once. You want to think about touring like test driving a car. You don't just take like one spin around the block, right? You want to kind of test drive a couple times. You want to go back on a weekend or later in the day when management has gone home. You can say, oh, well, place, looks and feels good on the off hours. That's the one that you would want to take more seriously.
Okay. So a little bit of like a surprise visit.
Yeah. I suggest that. Yes.
Kind of like a secret shopper thing.
Yeah. Sort of at a time when, maybe things are a little bit quieter or the management's not all there, because they're not going to be able to put on the show.
Well, and that is a little bit similar, I think, to buying a house. I remember us looking at a house. This was many years ago, and there was a house in a part of the city that was, slowly up and coming, right? But not quite there yet. And I remember our realtor saying, drive by at different times of the day, drive by at night, take a look at what the neighborhood looks like. Like there's a park down the road. What's going on in the park at, 10 o'clock at night versus 10 o'clock in the morning. And so it's really kind of feels like it's sort of the same philosophy in a lot of ways. Yeah. Okay. Well, so back to the noses. What is that about?
So the nose knows, right? So right. Smell's one of the quickest, most honest ways to get a read, I think, on a community. Your sense of smell does not lie. So, a faint odor here and there is totally human. These are people's homes. It's not a hotel lobby, right? But if there's a consistent heavy smell, that tells you there's a systems issue. It could mean that there's not enough caregivers on the floor to respond quickly, or that cleanliness isn't being prioritized the way it should be. But on the flip side, if it smells like, a perfume counter at the mall that's not good either, because
Oh, I
sometimes,
hate those things.
right? It's just
I
cover up.
really do.
They're covering, right. They're trying to mask something. Yeah.
Yeah. So if your eyes are watering, don't, they're definitely masking something. So a healthy community, it smells like life. You might smell some food cooking or some coffee or a little bit of disinfectant. You want it to smell like people actually live there. And then you also want to pay attention to how it smells in different areas, right? So the lobby's almost always going to be smelling nice when you walk in because that's their showroom. But you want to take a little walk near the hallways, near the elevators, near, the dining room, the activity spaces, because that's where you're going to catch, what's really going on. And, walk by the apartments, like on the hallway, because you can kind of get a sense of what's happening if the rooms are emanating like some really bad stench and a bunch of them are, then that's a problem. Maybe the trash isn't being picked up or, worst case scenario, some of the residents are sitting in their own, feces. So that's really
bodily
bad.
fluids.
Yeah. You don't want that.
You don't want that. So, if your gut and your nose are kind of both saying that something's off, then believe them. It's not really about being picky at this point. It's about trusting your instincts. The best communities out there don't really need to cover up good care with air freshener, is what I always say. So,
Right. So let's assume you walk into a place and it smells okay.
Yeah.
What else, the first thing when you walk into a community like this, what's the first thing you should look for?
Look at the energy. Like I mentioned before, that you want to notice, are people smiling? Are they active? Are they involved? Or are they sitting around in their chairs, half asleep watching TV? The best communities have a pulse. You'll see staff chatting with the residents, joking around. The residents are greeting each other by name. Someone's singing along to music. Notice too if the staff know the residents' names and use them in a warm manner.
Mm-hmm.
So a caregiver who says, "Hi, Miss Betty, did you enjoy bingo today?" Tells you there's genuine engagement. But a staff member who kind of avoids eye contact or calls everyone sweetie or dear, might be signaling that they're burned out or they're not trained well or they don't care. And then also just pay attention to how it feels. Like, do you feel a sense of warmth and movement, or does it feel tense and rushed and sterile? Families will tell me, like that they can't put their finger on it, they can't explain it, but that's a place doesn't feel good, or that it feels amazing and they walk in and everybody's smiling. But the ones that they felt didn't feel good, months later, they might find out there was management changes, turnover, unhappy staff, and overall issues. So really trust your gut again. Your intuition is truly your best tour guide because it picks up the things that your eyes might miss. So it's a real, true, intuitive feeling you will get when you walk into a community.
One of the things that we've told people when they've asked for our advice on this is that, frankly, the people at the community will tell you exactly what they think you want to hear. So what are, in addition to those sort of the observations and the following of the intuition, what are some of the questions that we can ask that will get us the real answers?
Yes, definitely. So you want to ask questions that force them to explain and tell stories, not just answer like with a yes or no. So instead of saying, "Do you have good staffing?" try, "What happens if my mom needs help at 2 a.m.?" So you really want to dig in, like with very detailed, specific questions, not a yes or no. Or say, if dad refuses a shower for a few days, how do you handle that? Not, are you going to give dad a shower if he doesn't want one? Yes or no, right? That's not going to tell you anything. And then you're going to learn a lot from their tone and examples of what they're telling you versus their words. So if they sound defensive or vague, take note of that. And if they're, seemingly competent and compassionate, that's a good sign. So just get full rounded answers from them, not yes or no's.
It reminds me a little bit about how we used to try to have conversations when our kids were little, right? If they come home from school and you say, did you have a good day? Yes or no, versus tell me something you did at school today to get them talking. So it feels like the same thing there for sure.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I think one thing we learned too with the second facility, we learned to ask the question about how long staff members had been there too. So the first facility, the management turnover was insane.
Every 4 to 6 months, they got a new executive director.
It was,
wow.
Oh
Bad
gosh.
sign.
Yeah.
Very, very, very bad sign.
Right. It's a bad sign. But of course, once your loved one has already moved in, as we know, right? Not easy just to necessarily pick them up and move them
and
somewhere
unfortunately, the executive director, when we moved in, had been there for a bit.
Yep.
And, all the things you're talking about, it's kind of funny. I will say she was kind of nuts in a weird sort of way, but a lovable nuts. And she did know the residents. I remember. I mean, she had hair flying everywhere. Yeah. She dressed she dressed in some crazy stuff, but she seemed like a decent one. And unfortunately, though, that's the thing. 6 months later, gone.
Yeah.
So, and then from then on, the entire time my mother lived there, I mean, I think they went through, including the interims, in about 2.5 years, 10.
That probably tells you that there's an issue with the upper management, which tells you that there's an overall issue with the way that they manage the company and the community itself. So that's, it's a bad sign. Unfortunately, it's not always the end all be all. Sometimes, it's okay, especially with, the floor staff. There is going to be turnover regardless of how good a community is. It's just that kind of job. So you can expect that, but you can ask questions like, what is the staffing ratio? So like, how many caregivers do you have on the floor at any given time? Mm-hmm. How about overnight? How many staff are available, and what kind of staff? Is there a dedicated staff for, let's say, housekeeping versus laundry versus caregiving versus dining room? or is it just everybody does everything, which is never a good idea either.
Yeah.
You want to have dedicated staff. But you do want to ask, how long has the executive director been there, and how long has the community been there, and how, is it a privately run community? Is it publicly traded kind of company? I think that makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. How long have they had the current pricing? How often does the pricing change? What is the percent change? There's definitely a lot of questions that can really give you a little bit of a clearer idea of how the community runs.
Well, I definitely, I like the point that you made there about, not necessarily. I mean, now we did ask how long this executive director had been there, and he's been there for 10, 11 years, something like that, which is, was fantastic. But I like the point that you make that maybe it's less about asking how long any one specific person has been there, because to your point, we do know there's a lot of turnover. I mean, our daughter's a nurse, we understand, like, they can be some burnout jobs depending on what type of, nursing or healthcare you're doing. So we get that. I think another telling point to me for where your mom is now, Steve, in addition to the executive director, is the lovely woman in the dining room who we met on the first day.
She is amazing.
I loved her. And I did, Sherry, to your point, I got such a good vibe from her. She was so sweet to your mom when I took your mom to the dining room and I helped her make her first best friends at the facility.
Right.
Yeah. If anyone's been listening to this show for a while, they know that I am the one who helped her make her besties there.
We know.
But the woman in the dining room is just, she's amazing. And she was so sweet to your mom, and I could tell that it was not put on.
Oh, it absolutely. I mean, she knows everybody's name. She knows what everybody likes. She knows what everybody doesn't like. Mm-hmm. And basically, they come on into the dining room, sit down, and their favorite drink is brought over to them. Mm-hmm. without even asking.
Yeah.
That's a good sign for sure. Yeah. I mean, just like in any job or any career, there's going to be people that really care. They really have a heart for what they're doing. In this industry, that's a really important thing to have. But unfortunately, in reality, not everybody cares that much. If you have a community where the majority does care and does have a heart and for what they're doing and shows interest in the residents, that's the main important thing. You're not ever going to find a community where every single staff member is perfect and right on things. It's just not real, but you want a community where the majority, at least, do you get a sense from them that they do.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal. But so we've actually gotten this question before from a listener. What is your opinion on bringing the elderly loved one with you for a tour?
Yeah, so it depends, right? So some parents really love and really insist on being involved and feeling empowered, and they want to ask the questions and see the apartments and and see how it all goes, especially if they don't have any cognitive decline at that point, and they're pretty independent. But other parents completely shut down. The moment that you walk in, they cross their arms, they look at you like you're betraying them, and or they sometimes even refuse to get out of the car. So if your loved one is resistant, do the first round of tours on your own, and then invite your parent for what you would want to call a visit. Don't call it a tour. Language really does matter here. So, don't call it, I know that this is kind of ingrained in a lot of people, but don't call it a facility, call it a community. Or
it's a community, of course.
Yeah. For whatever reason, facility or old age home or nursing home, like that kind of freaks out our parents. So when you do bring them, you want to plan something enjoyable, right? So always, plan to have lunch or dinner there, because obviously the dining experience is going to tell you a lot. And you want to notice if your loved one starts chatting with the residents or vice versa. Or if they invite you in for a conversation, that really says something about the culture there. And so, yeah, you want to encourage, if they are with you, to kind of chat with a few of the residents. And, seniors don't really have a filter. So they're going to tell you straight out.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Yeah, they'll tell you, straight out whether the food's good or the staff is kind or the activities are actually fun or they're actually doing the activities that they promise. So sometimes hearing it from the peers lands a little bit better than when the family, tells the parent. And just try to keep it low key, doesn't have to be a big production. Keep it sort of casual, you're just stopping by, and check out a potential new neighborhood. And you want to remember that the goal is not to convince them. It's just to help them feel what the life there might be like. That's the goal. The more you push and the more you try to convince them, the less they're inclined to want to do anything or go. So, leave it up to them. If they want to come with you the first time, okay. But if they really are resistant, go and pick out two and say, hey, let's go have lunch or let's go have dinner, and don't make it into a whole big tour. Right.
Right. And I mean, having gone through this twice, the first time my mother really was not physically able to go on these tours yet. But the second time she absolutely was. And basically what I did several tours. It's like you said, I narrowed it down for her. And after every single one, I gave her a full report because, believe me, she insisted upon it. But then I found this one that I thought might be the way to go. And she said, well, I'm going to get to go. I said, of course you're going to get to go. Let's go. And, she's very with it mentally. If she had said, I hate this place, then we would have moved on and tried to find something else. But thankfully, she said, no, this is good. let's do it.
Yeah.
I think we took some video too. I think
We did. Well, the first time around, yes, we took a lot of video and pictures and stuff and showed it to her and whatnot.
Yeah, then that's great. That's great. But once they do get in there, you want to make sure that they're feeling the vibe too, that, and you can tell, like if you're on a tour with your parent, like you know them, like if they're acting like they're like not into it or they just like don't feel it, like you'll know. So just watch their kind of like body language and their face language and even more than what they're saying. And I think that you'll get a good sense of what they like. But I think narrowing it down for them to maybe like your top two is really the key.
Again, I feel like it's because we talk about we're sandwich generation all the time. It reminds me of like when we took our son on his college tours, speaking of like the look on his face. I knew the college he picked, the university he picked. The second he set foot on that campus, I could see the look in his eyes. I'm like, oh yeah. And then we still went to we still toured some others, but that was it.
Well, and to anybody who is a new listener, if you go way back, there is an episode that compares picking out a college to picking out an assisted living. Yeah. And there's so many similarities.
Yeah, food.
Food's a big one.
Food's a big one, especially for
size of the rooms,
boy.
dorms, everything. Yes, of course.
Of course.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Sherry, you also had some advice for how to deal with other family members who want to come along on these visits. How do you deal with the conflict that might arise from differing opinions?
Yeah, the sibling circus. That's what I call it. Oh boy, that's a big one. So my advice is really to assign roles in advance, right? So you have one sibling that maybe takes the notes, one sibling that observes a little bit more, and one that asks the questions. And if you can agree ahead of time on that, that will, help a lot. But also agree ahead of time that you are not going to be making any decisions in the parking lot, after the tour. So emotions are obviously going to be very high. And at that time, when emotions are high, is not the time to make a decision. Mm-hmm. So you want to come back later when everybody's calmer and, in the end, the goal is not to win, it's to find the right fit for your parent, right? So I think if everybody has their specified role right from the beginning, it really saves a lot of frustration. I love working with families where one person, like let's say there's 3 siblings, one of them is going to take on the financial role, financial responsibility, one not necessarily paying for themselves, but just, handling the money, the finances. And then one takes on the healthcare role. And then one takes on, let's say, the physical role of, moving things in or, buying certain things for the apartment or whatever that is, or modeling it, furnishing it. So if each sibling has their own role, it really helps to kind of eliminate some of the infighting that tends to happen. And I think that also another thing is maybe not everybody come all together on the tour. Maybe just one sibling comes and reports back, because sometimes it can get a little bit messy if everybody's there and everybody's got their opinions. And
I'm picturing, if there are 3 siblings, geez, I mean, all 3 of them going there at the same time.
Yeah. And they do often. They do. And
it's hard for me to picture my brother. I have an older brother, but he didn't go on any of these tours. It was me and Jennifer. And I can't even imagine bringing along 2 siblings and all of us trying to, decide on something.
Exactly. It's too much. So if you do, though, then like I said, make sure each person has their own role, so that you're not all doing the same thing and all asking questions. And I mean, I've fielded, where it's been like 3 siblings or even 4 siblings where they're all just throwing questions out one after another, all around the table. Like each of them has their concern, their question. And it's like, oh my gosh, one asks and I'm like barely finished answering. And then the next person has a question. It's like, it's too much and it gets everyone crazy. So yes, my ultimate advice would be just one person at a time, maybe two, but always have a role designed before you go.
And I think what some advice we had given out on this show is, let's say it is one person that's doing this hunt, like in my situation, we have suggested that go back for a second tour, but bring your spouse, bring someone else along because they're going to notice stuff that you don't notice.
Absolutely. Yes. You have to have another set of eyes, after you've gone and you've determined that, this might be a decent place. Definitely have another loved one come with you, whether it's, the parent or themselves or spouse and or a sibling.
And believe me, when I took my mother for the tour of the place that she's in now, she noticed everything. Oh my gosh, she really did. I mean, she practically was pulling out a tape measure and just she noticed everything. I mean, and growing up, we lived in a lot of houses, so she knows how to pick out a house. And I think she was using that particular bit of information in her head on trying to pick this stuff out. Believe me, she was focused. It was great. I loved it. It was great. But let's have some fun. What is the craziest story you have from conducting these tours? I want to hear it.
I have so many. Well, I don't. This one sort of involves me a lot because, okay, so I'm on a tour and we're walking down the hallway, and the mom was actually with us, and she was mobile, but she did have a little bit of cognitive decline, some mild cognitive impairment. But anyway, she had to go to the bathroom. So we passed by one of the public, bathrooms in the hallway, and I'm standing out there in the hallway with the adult children. There was just was a couple, the son and the daughter-in-law. We're just chit-chatting, and all of a sudden I hear screaming coming from the bathroom, and I didn't see any caregivers right nearby. And I'm like, oh my God. So I run into the bathroom. First of all, the stench was like,
oh no,
nauseating. Then I look down and I see just like the floor inside the stall. I could kind of see it. It was just covered with mess. And the lady had obviously she got confused and she couldn't figure out the door handle from the inside of the door. So she was stuck and she got scared. And she also she had an accident and a little bit of a blowout, let's call it. So nobody was in there, and I felt so bad because she's, freaking out and needed to get out. So I literally crawled under the stall.
Oh my gosh.
Oh no.
Get her out, and she's half naked. She's got excrement all over her, all over the wall, all over the floor. I don't even know how it even happened. But anyway, I unlocked the door for her. And thankfully, a caregiver came in at that moment and helped her to get cleaned up. Meanwhile, I'm a little bit covered with stuff. And so I'm, in the sink trying to get myself cleaned up. And finally, I go back out to the hallway and to the family waiting there horrified, and I know that I smelled bad. And I mean, I don't know if they were embarrassed because of her or just, horrified because of the situation, but they got her out of there and just left.
Oh, see, but I would think okay, even the person who is giving us a tour, but who's not a healthcare worker, you went to great extremes to get there.
Very much extremes.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like a good vibe kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I you would think. I think they were just, she was still kind of a mess, and I think they were just totally, mortified,
overwhelmed. Yeah.
And just I think the mom was just overwhelmed with it all. So I think they, if I remember correctly, I think they did come back, but it was after I already left a few months later or something. I was at a different community, but anyway, yeah, there's that. There was a time that the son, they were eating lunch, the family, and the son went over and tested the emergency pull cord of like
No.
one of the other residents to see how fast the staff would respond. And then, yeah, so like we all came running like to the table, and he's just like, okay, you passed. And like,
Oh my gosh.
Well, that's one way to go.
I guess so. Yes. So yeah, families do really interesting things on tours.
Oh my gosh.
It keeps things interesting.
I would
Yeah.
imagine it does.
Yes, absolutely. So you never know what you're going to get.
Sherry, where can people find your book and also the accompanying workbook?
Yeah, so you can go on Amazon.com or Barnes and Nobles or Walmart.com. Any of the online bookstores have both of the book and the workbook, and the workbook is by the same name. It's kind of an extension of the book, so it has a whole bunch of checklists and journal prompts and stuff for each of the topics that are in the book. And then you can also go to my website, which you can buy the books there as well. It's the same as the book, titled Senior Living Made Simple. And on there, you can also sign up for one-on-one coaching sessions in case you do need a hand while you're.
Oh, that would have come in so handy.
Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. We would have signed up. Absolutely would have signed up, 3.5 years ago when we were doing this because we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a little hand. This is not something that you typically have a lot of experience doing, because it's kind of, when it happens,
We do now.
Yeah.
Now we know what we're doing, but
Now
back
you
then,
know.
not so much. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and the biggest piece of advice I would just give to your listeners is, to really plan ahead. I know that, you've had other guests on the show who've said the same thing, and I just want to emphasize that because it is so vital to not wait until your parent is in the ER at 2 a.m. It's, just too stressful to have to try to figure everything out then. So if you can, start early, touring a couple places here and there, learning about what's available, what's out there, that is going to be a lifesaver for everyone.
And, our experience in finding my mother's first assisted living, she was in skilled nursing. She could not move back home and live independently. And what I've found, when I see somebody on a tour while I'm visiting my mother, if I walk out and they're having that parking lot conversation that you were talking about, I ask them a couple questions because I'm a busybody too. But, I swear everyone I've ever talked to, oh yeah, they're in the skilled nursing facility right over here. That's how it works. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, at least have an idea of what exists out there before you get to this point.
Yeah, it's so important. In fact, the title of my book, Senior Living Made Simple, simple is an acronym, and one of the letters is P, and that is for preparation, and which means you need to get prepared ahead of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sherry Ross, Senior Living Sales Professional and author of the book, as you said, Senior Living Made Simple. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks, Sherry.
And thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. If you want to get in touch with us, there's a few ways to do it. You can email us at caregivinggenxstyle@gmail.com. You can also send us a text or leave us a voicemail. I'm going to go ahead and say right now, voicemails are the best. 804-723-1221. You can find us on Twitter. The handle's at Gen X Caregiving if you want to send a message through there. Look for the link in our show notes to get you to Facebook because that is where we post the most. Like I said, just go to the show notes. There's a link there. Click on it. Take you right there. We hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day.
Good night, everyone.